Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the Humble Choice bundle for August 2022. Another seemingly average month at a glance, but there are a few that did stand out to me on closer inspection. Let me know what you think of this month's bundle in the comments below. Be sure to check the timestamps for specific games, and stay tuned for my final thoughts in the end. Okay, let's get to the review. Our first game is Omno, a 3D puzzle adventure game where you play as a guy with a staff. There is a story, but I have to say I completely forgot the little bits I read almost as soon as I read them. The character's staff and his affinity with light has some sort of importance to the overall world and story, but beyond that, I couldn't tell you much more. The gameplay here is fairly straightforward. There are some puzzles and platforming that must be done in each level in order to collect these orbs of light. Along the way, players receive new abilities such as dashing and surfing, which helps them overcome new challenges. I didn't think anything was that difficult here, and some of you might know that I'm not great at platformers in general, so that probably means a hardcore enthusiast won't find much here on that front. However, the low-poly environments are beautiful to look at and are vibrant with a lot of wildlife that adds to the immersion. It seems that everything, besides the music, was done by a solo developer, which is an amazing feat. On the topic of music, it's a beautiful soundtrack that really accentuates the world, but I thought it stood out enough on its own for me that I'd want to listen to it outside of the game. This was a simple yet very pleasant experience. I definitely want to finish this one soon, and I encourage others to give it a try. Next up is Emily is Away 3, which is a narrative-driven game about your character's senior year. The idea seems very generic, but the execution is what elevates this experience. Everything is told through Facebook, a social media website similar to its real-life counterpart. By creating this atmosphere for the game, it did a really good job taking me through the Wayback Machine. Heck, I think I even started my Facebook profile in 2008, around the time I left high school. There was a lot here that was a blast from the past. These days, I don't really use the platform anymore, but I still remember the frantic back and forth with the private chats, creating pointless status messages, liking dumb stuff, and creeping on people. I felt the writing did a good job to convey this high schooler mentality, and the exchanges with the other characters felt realistic. However, if a high school drama story is not something you'd care to read through, or just the fact that it's solely a narrative and not much more than that, then I'd say this game isn't for you. Although, I did enjoy my time with it, and will plan to come back and finish this one as well. I might even check out some of this developer's earlier entries that look to be a parody of AOL's Messenger. Mind Scanners is an interesting game with not so great gameplay. Players take the role of a mind scanner for this machine-run government known as the Structure. You're tasked with the mental well-being of the populace and ensure that everything is running smoothly, even at the cost of shattering people's personalities in the process. Also, there's a growing underground rebellion that seeks to overthrow their control. Basically, you can side with either one, but have to keep in mind your resources and the fact that the Structure has your daughter. I thought it made for an interesting futuristic dystopian setting, but I can't say I'm a fan of the gameplay. Each day you have a certain amount of time to find patients, determine if they're insane, and if they are, then you need to treat them. Perhaps this changes as players progress in the game, but I found the time per day to be essentially useless. I was told by my overseer that I needed to stop worrying about my patient's well-being and just get the job done, but I pretty much only had time to treat one patient per day, if that. I also didn't see a point in saying they were sane because you only earned money for treatments, which is necessary to pay your upkeep costs at the end of every day. However, it was the treatments themselves that brought the game down. Each patient has their treatments determined by symbols which can be cleared through various tools. These tools are played out in minigames that are usually pretty simple to figure out. The problem is that you use these same tools over and over again. It quickly becomes monotonous after the first few uses of each item. Maybe things change further on in the game, but unless the story really pulls you in, then I don't think I'd bother with this one. Next up, we have In Sound Mind, which is a psychological horror game where you play the role of a therapist delving into recordings of past patients. However, players start the game with no backstory and are dumped in an abandoned apartment building. Throughout the areas, players have to piece together the story via notes and the cassette tapes they find. There seem to be a lot of areas barred off until players found an appropriate item, so I imagine there'll be a lot of backtracking through old areas, but it was done well enough that it didn't feel like a chore. Everything felt appropriately spooky with the level design, but the audio and music did a lot to create an immersive experience. Although I don't know much about the story in my hour with the game, it definitely was compelling enough for me to want to continue playing. Actually, I've had this on my wish list for a long time now because the original vibes I got from it reminded me of Alan Wake. Not that it plays like Alan Wake, but the same feeling of horror and mystery are present here. Can't wait to find some more time to turn off the lights and enjoy this creepy game. Once again, we're given a simulator game in the humble choice. And with a name like Gas Station Simulator, well, my expectations were pretty low. And as usually is the case when this happens, I come out liking it better than expected. I mean, I guess save for last month's Lawnmower Simulator. In this game, players run a gas station in the middle of the desert. They'll need to go through the process of renovation as well as catering to customer needs, with filling up tanks, of course, selling snacks and drinks, and eventually things like a car wash or repairs. Basically, it can eventually become a full-service gas station, which is more than I expected. And there's actually a story? Sort of? My guess is that it's fairly bare bones, but I was surprised that the main character's uncle is some sort of mob boss and is trying to use your gas station as one of his businesses. I don't know how well that pans out or if the story develops, but I was still surprised something was here. I know I bashed Lawnmower Simulator last month, but I actually liked this game. I find the idea of starting from nothing but a rundown shack and turning it into something nice and a manageable business to be really rewarding. It's very reminiscent of Stardew Valley or other farming sim RPGs, which I really love. Honestly, if these type of simulator games had engaging characters, then I might actually be more on board with them. As it stands, I enjoyed my time here and could see myself coming back to it one of these days. I've actually owned Plague Tale Innocence for a while now, ever since Epic gave it away on their platform. It's only now that I finally tried the game out, and I was pretty happy with it. Plague Tale Innocence takes players on a journey, following Amicia and her younger brother Hugo. Pretty early on, disaster strikes her family, and she's tasked with watching over her brother in order to stay ahead of the Inquisition after him. I thought the scenery here was stunning, even for a game that is a few years old now at this point. There's a great attention to detail, and it seems like the devs did their research to try to create authentic environments. Gameplay here is largely stealth mechanics, as Amicia and her brother aren't martial characters. There'll be a lot of creating distractions and using cover to break line of sight. Occasionally, the use of Amicia's sling becomes necessary to deal with some enemies, but it seems like that won't be the go-to method. However, there is a bit of a supernatural, creepy aspect to the game as well with the plague. While the bubonic plague in real life was bad enough, in this alternate world, the plague manifests itself as a disease, but also as a horde of rats that wreak havoc and, eat people instantly. This was a great time, and I definitely was engaged with it the whole way through. As the most expensive game in this bundle, I expected something decent from Hot Wheels Unleashed. But at the same time, it was a Hot Wheels game, so I guess I didn't really know what to think. As a racing game about Hot Wheels, players can expect to race all sorts of various cars on the iconic track pieces. As far as the racing goes, I thought it was okay. I'm not really into racing games and couldn't tell you which are good or not. However, I felt other racing titles Humble Choice has given us in the past have been more enjoyable for me. Features like dirt scumming up the car or car destruction are not present here, and it makes sense, but I like that extra level of detail in some of the other racing games. And while the tracks are in different environments, everything started to feel samey really quickly because the track pieces look the same. I guess, like the actual toy. One thing that sounded cool, although I didn't try it out, is players can build their own tracks, which I'm sure Hot Wheels enthusiasts will appreciate. Honestly, I felt bored playing this game. In part, it was because of my earlier stated reasons, but also because I thought there was a huge disparity between difficulty levels. On easy, everything was trivial, and I would get first with no one being remotely near me. However, bump the difficulty to medium, and I found myself struggling not to be last. I was getting a bit better, but I think there was too big of a gap between the two and no difficulty to learn the game at your proper skill level. So, as you could probably already tell, I'm not too keen to come back to this one. The last game in the bundle is The Ascent, a top-down action RPG set in a vast cyberpunk city. The presentation here is hands down a top-notch experience. I was impressed at the level of detail each area had. The lighting here is great, and even being top-down, I felt like the city was full of life and believable, at least from first impressions. The polish in the visuals is amazing, especially given that this isn't a AAA game, or at least isn't priced as one. The gameplay here felt pretty good too. Nothing seemed incredibly unique, but everything was smooth and responsive. It feels like a lot of the combat will be dodging around to avoid getting hit and then firing off your gun. Maybe as your character develops, different playstyles will open up. The story here revolves around megacorporations exploiting the common people. But early on, the megacorp that owns your character suddenly falls apart. I can't say much further than that because I didn't get that far, but this theme seems par for the course for a cyberpunk setting. All that said, the hour I played was pretty fun, and I would definitely recommend giving this one a try. Okay, let's wrap this up and see if this bundle is worth it or not. I based my rating solely on whether I thought the game was worth playing on about an hour or so of hands-on gameplay. Overall, this month wasn't that bad. Actually, I'd say it was a good month, which I definitely didn't expect when I first saw what was on offer. It's another month with no strong AAA title, but I don't think that's a problem with some of the stronger games this month. Speaking of which, let's get into the recommendations. Starting at the top, as always, with my must-plays of the month, I have Plague Tale Innocence and In Sound Mind. Plague Tale's presentation, both visually and narratively, was compelling, and it had the perfect blend of gameplay and cinematic to create a fun stealth action adventure. In Sound Mind also did well on the presentation side by invoking a very creepy atmosphere and keeping the player tense as they turned each corner. Both of these have been games I've been wanting to play for a long time, so I'm glad to give myself an excuse to do so now. In my strong recommendations sits The Ascent, Omno, and Gas Station Simulator. The Ascent brings decent top-down shooter gameplay with a gritty and immersive cyberpunk world. Omno is a simple puzzle platformer, but is a really chill experience in a beautiful world. And Gas Station Simulator, well, it was a lot better than what I ever expected it to be. If it sounded remotely fun, then I really recommend giving it a try and looking past the title. My week recommendations for the month are Emily is Away 3 and Mind Scanners. Emily is Away 3 is a game that is cleverly executed, however, I don't think the story would stick for me if it wasn't for the nostalgia factor this game leans heavily on. Mind Scanners, boy, this was a tough one actually. A part of me thought about putting it in the Don't Bother With section because personally, I don't see myself ever returning to it. That being said, there was enough merit here that I felt it wasn't doing the game justice. What did end up in my Don't Bother With section is Hot Wheels Unleashed. A part of me is in disbelief that the top dollar game would end up here, but that doesn't really matter these days. Yeah, this game was just boring, and unless you're an absolute diehard Hot Wheels fan, then I just can't see this game doing anything for a player over the many other racing games that are out there. And that wraps up my thoughts on this month's bundle. A good month with a couple of really standout titles. Do you agree with my thoughts? What games, if any, are you looking forward to playing? Let me know what your thoughts are, if there are any different recommendations you'd make in the comments below. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.